I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a books beside my bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. This is my reading week from the 10th until the 15th of July. I read a total of 8 things this week. It equated to around about 2007 pages and my yearly reading total is 337 books. The first book that I read this week was a buddy read with Bree. We finished off the Ardent St. Ives series by Alexis. The third book, which is How to Belong with a Billionaire, is the conclusion in this trilogy. This is essentially the best way to summarize the story, and it doesn't sound the best, but it's 50 Shades of Grey, but make it queer and so much better. Obviously, being the third book, it's kind of hard to really talk spoilers in this one. And what I will say is this one felt less like a romance, but more like a complete story in that the two heroes in the story have a lot of things to work through before they can even be a couple. And while it's possibly not my favorite in the series, it's still a really fantastic read and still a favorite book because Alexis can quite literally make me read anything. The entire story is told from Arden's perspective. At the beginning of this book, he has broken up with Caspian, who is the billionaire love interest, and he discovers that Caspian is suddenly engaged. And so this entire story is really about Arden figuring out who he is and what he wants and whether or not that's still Caspian and whether their relationship is actually healthy for either of them. Caspian has a lot of trauma that he is working through when he seriously needs to be in therapy, but he currently isn't at the start of this book. The way that these two work through their issues, not all of it is healthy, but they do get there in the end. And I enjoyed it. I think there are a lot of side characters in this book that get a lot more page time and I was living for it. George is one of my favourite characters in the entire series. I will say there is a content warning in here for attempted sexual assault, as well as mentions of historical off-page childhood sexual assault and sexual abuse. So be aware of that going into it. It does tie into a lot of the story and it does come up often, but it's not explicitly on page. The attempted sexual assault is for a brief part of the book. There's a whole lot of trauma that's gone on that has to be dealt with and is handled really deftly by Alexis Hall. He could make me read anything. So I loved reading that with Bree and I'm glad that we finished one of Alexis Hall's series, so that's pretty exciting. Then I went and finished the Wild series by K.A. Tucker. So I read the novella, which is 2.5, and that is Forever Wild. This sort of wraps up the conclusion of Calla and Jonah's story arc. They've finally settled in Anchorage. They've finally got all of their family coming together for Christmas, so everyone who's important in their lives is going to be in the one place with them. They're engaged, but everyone is on them to set a date for the wedding in a location that they would prefer them to be. It's Christmas time, it's snowing, everyone is forced to be in the same space and tensions run high, and it was just a really gorgeous little short look into these characters, and it was a nice way to conclude their story. You don't have to have read it, you get a really good wrap up in book 2, but this was just a little nice way to see a lot of the characters who we've heard a lot about or have been sort of side characters coming in to the story and being more present. And then I read Running Wild, which is book 3 and changes protagonists. So we have Marie, who is Jonah's best friend and is the woman who has been in love with him for years, but he didn't really realize and didn't return her feelings, and she has been hung up on him for ages, and at first that has hindered her relationship with Calla, and we see that has grown and changed a little bit in this book. When I tell you I have never ugly cried so hard while reading a book as I was while reading this one, and look, there are a few other factors into play. I was very hormonal at the time that I was reading this, I realized later, but I spent a good third of this book just with tears running down my cheek. And it wasn't necessarily the story was sad, but just that the story had that kind of impact on me. I related very much to Marie. She's a woman in her mid to late 30s. Unlike me, she really wants to have a partner and a child. That's her thing. So that wasn't the part that I related to, but being a woman in your 30s and just feeling adrift in your life and not really knowing what the next step is forward for you, that I get. So that was kind of hitting close to home. But it's her relationship with Tyler, who has recently moved to Alaska. He has bought a big property. He is raising sled dogs. And the first part of the book is then really getting off on the wrong foot. She's a veterinarian one of his competitors in the sled races is one of her clients and comes to her with an animal and claims that Tyler has been mistreating his animals, and so she's a bit of a crusader, and so she goes to confront him about it, and that sets them off on the wrong foot. And then there is the huge sled race in Alaska, and she's one of the veterinarians on call for that, and so through that process she gets to know Tyler a lot more, and the two have a couple of moments while on the course, and suddenly he shuts himself off, and she finds out that he was previously married and that his wife had died during childbirth. So be aware that is a content warning. And so he's still dealing with a lot of those emotions, and she's dealing with everything with herself and her family. Like, there is a really great representation of family who struggle to get along. She's one of 3 girls, and her 2 sisters have kids or are having kids, and you know, there's a huge amount of pressure that this family is placing on one another. And so she has that going on. He has these feelings, and every time they come together, it is just not the right time. But my gosh, I loved this book so much. It was fantastic. Then I read Call Me Maybe by Cara Bastone. This was an Audible original, so I was listening to it while I was doing some work during the week, which actually turned out to be a lifesaver. It is about Vera, who has a small online business, and her website goes down, and so she's on the line to tech support, and she ends up talking to Cal, and he is trying to help her fix the problem. She's been on hold for ages, and so he promises to stay online until he fixes the problem, but it turns out to be a lot bigger than that. The two end up spending like 8 hours on the phone together this first day, and Vera's car breaks down, and they end up, you know, having dinner while on the phone, and then they're talking to each other the next day, and they start to develop this connection with one another, even though they don't know each other and they've never met. And then something happens, and Vera begins to think or wonder whether Cal actually has a partner, and so she ends the phone calls, and so things get a little bit tense. But this was just such a cute story about literally meeting on a phone call. It was really, really great. I'm not doing it justice explaining it. Please go listen to it. I also finally read Kiss Hard by Nalini Singh. This is book 4 in the Hard Play series. So this is her New Zealand rugby series. This one you kind of have to read after you've read the other ones, because, well, I suppose you don't have to, but the hero is the youngest of 4 brothers, and each brother has got a book in the series. And Katie is also the youngest sister of one of the partners of one of the brothers. So Katie and Daniel have spent a lot of time together growing up, so they've known each other for a long time, and they like to play practical jokes on one another and annoy the hell out of each other. So it's kind of like a frenemies to lovers sort of situation in this book, with fake dating thrown in. Katie is a double amputee. She lost both of her legs when she was in her, well, just pre-teens, but she is also a Paralympian. She's a sprinter, and she is incredible at what she does. And Daniel is a pro rugby player, and he's also very well known. The book opens, they're all out at a bar one night, and she happens to notice that Daniel's there and that he doesn't look right, and she begins to wonder whether his drink has been spiked. And being a pro rugby player, he's hounded by the media, and she knows that if the media see him looking like he's on drugs, it's going to be very detrimental to his career, because that has serious implications for contracts and sponsors and things like that. So she tries to get him out of there without being seen by anyone else, and she gets him to a hospital and gets him taken care of. Of course, something leaks, not necessarily about the drugs, but it's suggested that it would be a good idea for them to appear like they are dating, and that they're a couple for at least the next couple of months, for both their careers' sakes and for sponsorships and deals and whatnot. And so the two agree to do it, and it's just sweet and funny, and these two know how to annoy one another, but they also care very deeply about one another. Like, deep down they actually do get along, and they would do anything for the other, and I loved it. I also read Little Wings of Fate by Cleo Evans. This is Creature Cafe book 9. I think this is the penultimate book in the series. I think book 10 may possibly be the last one, but I could be wrong. This is an MMM paranormal monster romance between 2 fanged fallen angels and a cursed human. Seth, the human, has been cursed so that he quite literally cannot die, which happens to be very useful because Gabriel, one of the fallen angels, his touch is lethal to humans. Got a full wrap up where I talked about the majority of the books in the series, but the barista is basically, I think he's a Grim Reaper for memory. I can't remember what he is just off the top of my head, but he runs a cafe, but he is a matchmaker for monster and human relationships, and Gabriel goes to him looking for a human partner for his fallen angel partner, Cam. Cam lost one of his wings in a previous book and has been feeling really down, and they both Cam and Gabriel think they need something or someone else in their relationship, and the barista reluctantly puts Seth forward as a possible candidate for a match. And it's tentative because the barista has a close friendship with Seth and he doesn't want to see him hurt, but he also knows that he's probably the best match for these two angels. Please check all the content warnings beforehand. There's a lot of things going on. There are dom-sub relationships, there's knife play, there's not so much blood play, but there is some blood drinking because these fallen angels have fangs. They're like vampires, kind of, and other bits and pieces going on. So, you know, you kind of have to check the content warnings with all of these books because they've all got strange and weird and wacky things going on with anatomy. I also read Little Green Vines. This one is by Britt Andrews. This was a sapphic paranormal / monster novella romance. It is about a demoness who lures a human woman into the woods because she believes her to be her mate, and all sorts of weird shenanigans go on in this book. So it's very short. I think it's only like 40 pages long, and it was entertaining. And then finally, I read Egotistical Puckboy by Eden Finley and Saxon James. This is book 1 in the Puckboy series. This is a spin-off of the CU hockey series that they did, which I read earlier in the year. It is sort of a hate to love relationship between Ezra and Anton. They both, at the start of this book, play for rival NHL teams, and then Anton is traded to Ezra's team in Boston. But just before this trade happens, the two of them have had this very antagonistic one-night stand, which neither of them can stop thinking of, and then suddenly Anton is there and they're forced to spend a lot of time together. And the media plays up a lot of speculation around whether or not they actually hate each other or whether they're actually friends or what's going on. But the one thing the media doesn't really pick up on is the fact that the two of them end up having this or forming this relationship. Ezra is sort of an unrepentant playboy who is out and proud, and his antics are splashed all over the tabloids, whereas Anton is out to his teammates and to his close friends, but doesn't really play that up in the media, and is not, you know, he doesn't like having his private life splashed everywhere. And so that creates a tension in their relationship. And Ezra has to do a lot of growing up in this book. Both of them have egos the size of mountains, and that prompts a lot of, you know, banter and things like that within the story. But it was fun and entertaining and a really good light sports romance read. For my friends who were watching the Australia live show that I did the other week, Eden Finley and Saxon James, I believe, are Australian romance authors. I am now going to be trying to do this thing where I try and read more, particularly more indie Australian romance authors. Like, I know a few and I have read some, but I always forget to say that they're Australian, and that is going to be my plan moving forwards. But Eden Finley has always been sort of someone I go to for really lighthearted sports romances, and I find their books enjoyable. All right, so that's what I read this week. In the comments, I would love to hear what you have been reading, or if you have read any of these books, feel free to share your thoughts on them down below. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave any kind of wild emoji that you like. Feel free to pick. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.